Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. See ebaymotors.com.
My dad works in B2B marketing. He came by my school for career day and said he was a big ROAS man. Then he told everyone how much he loved calculating his return on ad spend. My friends still laugh at me to this day.
Not everyone gets B2B, but with LinkedIn, you'll be able to reach people who do. Get a $100 credit on your next ad campaign. Go to linkedin.com/results to claim your credit. That's linkedin.com/results. Terms and conditions apply. LinkedIn, the place to be, to be.
Welcome to Orioles on the Verge. This is Zach Spedden, joined as always by Bob Phil and Nick Stevens. And on tonight's episode, we are going to bring you our mid-season top 50 update. This is usually one of our favorite shows of the year because not only do we get to update our top 50 based on the way things have played out over roughly the first two-thirds of the season, but we get the chance to incorporate new draft picks as well as reflect some graduates. And in this year's case, a lot of prospects moving out of the system because of trades. It's a trade deadline as the Orioles try to make the push to the playoffs. And we'll get into all of that in just a moment. But first, Orioles on the Verge is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything online sports betting. Right now, you can receive a 50% free bet of up to $250 on your first deposit to bet on anything from the UFC to baseball to Formula One racing. BetOnline is every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads while the games are being played. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino, get on a game of blackjack or poker, or on one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today, get on the action, use promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, for your 50% free bet credit on your first deposit up to $250. BetOnline, the game starts here. And as we like to do at the beginning of every episode, we want to welcome a new member to our Patreon community. For that, I will turn it to Bob, who is fresh back from vacation and ready to welcome a new member of our Patreon community.
Yeah, refreshed and relaxed after a nice week down in the Outer Banks with hurricanes all around. Dodged them left and right. Got a lot of rain, but that's about it. Ryan Prenger, welcome to the patron community. Sign up at the AA level. Got that discount for the full year straight up, so appreciate that. Hope you enjoy the content.
As a reminder, you can join our Patreon community for as little as $3 a month as a paying member at the $5 and $10 levels. Have access to bonus daily coverage as well as exclusive monthly updates to our top 50 list. Now, of course, our mid-season update and our preseason update go out on the main feed, but we have monthly updates in between both of those updates, and you get a chance to get them there over on Patreon. And with that, now we're going to get into the top 50 update for the midway point, roughly, of the 2024 season. And I will dive right in. There's very little surprise here at the first three spots. Jackson Holliday is still the number one prospect in the Orioles system, followed by Kobe Mayo at number 2 and Samuel Basayo at number 3. After that, you start to see a little bit of movement. Chase McDermott goes up a couple of spots to number 4. He's followed by Cade Povitz at 5th. Enrique Bradfield Jr., recently promoted to Double-A Bowie, checks in at number 6. Vance Honeycutt, the Orioles' first-round pick out of UNC, a 5-tool outfielder, but one that has a lot of work to do with the hit tool, comes in at 7th. Dylan Beavers follows him at number 8. Judd Fabian is 9th, and then the young left-hander Luis De Leon checks in at number 10. Now, as you can see here, if you're watching on YouTube, we have a little bit of a split within the top 10. As is usually expected, Bob, Nick, and I don't necessarily put the same players in the same order. And in fact, I had Brandon Young, who fell just outside of our top 10, in the last spot of my personal top 10. But other than that, basically we have the same players, but in different orders. But we'll start first with the top three of Holiday, Mayo, and Basayo, because they have held firm in these spots for a long time. Nick, these players are at different points. Holiday now, after a rough stint earlier this year in the major leagues, has come back up and is hitting really well. Kobe Mayo is up now and struggling a little bit at the plate, but there's no real reason for long-term concern. And then Samuel Basayo is just overmatching Double-A pitching at this point. So what are your thoughts on the top three right now?
It's still an amazing top three. Like, look what Jackson Holiday is doing up in the major leagues right now. It is truly unbelievable to see his home run power on display. Did not think that was going to come this year, but that is emerging and being a pleasant surprise in this lineup. Mayo, yeah, like you said, like we were joking about before we came on, Dan Connolly has become the voice of reason for Orioles prospects when it's talking about Kobe Mayo. So that's where we're at there. Not worried at all. And Basayo, yeah, like, look, I don't know. He's 19 years old still. I feel like I've been saying that for a while, but he's 19 years old at Double-A. He's hitting 30% above league average. And trivia question, can anyone guess Samuel Basayo's stat line against pitchers younger than him this season?
They don't exist.
Yeah, that stat does not exist. He's facing older competition all year long. Look, is he a great defender? No, but is he a good defender? Absolutely. He's also 19 and incredibly athletic for his size. I'm not concerned about the defense at all. The offensive numbers are through the roof. I just think this is, and those numbers, he's a 130 WRC plus right now at the Double-A level, and that includes a pretty slow start because the injury at the start of the season, his first like major quote unquote injury, missed a lot of baseball, a lot of crucial prep time in the spring, and that bled into the season. But he's going to end the year in AAA and probably be the top ranked prospect, and he will be the top ranked prospect in this system as soon as Holiday and Mayo graduate, and one of the top 10 prospects, top 5 prospects. I don't know how high he goes on national list in the top 100. It's truly remarkable to see all three of these guys in action this year. They just keep hitting.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Basayo, he's going to be a contender at least for top prospect in baseball, depending on who graduates coming into next year. He'll at least be top 5, top 10, like you said. A clear number one in any farm system in baseball other than the Orioles, who have Jackson Holiday and Kobe Mayo. And it's just a tale as old as time. Rinse and repeat. Fans clamor for top prospect to debut. What are they waiting for? He's obviously ready. Prospect comes up, struggles because Major League Baseball is hard. It's a lot harder than AAA, and there is an adjustment period. We saw it with Gunnar Henderson. We saw it with Adley Rutschman. We saw it with Colton Cowser big time last year. We saw it with Jackson Holiday this same season, and yet Kobe Mayo's a bust. Send him back down. Clearly should have traded him for Tarek Skubal at the deadline. No, Kobe Mayo is going to pull a Jackson Holiday at some point, whether it's this year or into 2025 like Cowser, but still one of the best prospects in baseball. And Jackson Holiday is maybe the best prospect in baseball for at least another month or however long he's still eligible to be so. Just phenomenal talent on the infield. This is why you don't trade these guys at the trade deadline for a push in a crapshoot playoff system that is baseball for a pitcher that could get hurt at any time. So glad the Orioles held on to these guys, and I'm super excited to have them in this system for the next 6-7 years.
Yeah, and as you look at the rest of the top 10, I think this is where the discussion gets a little bit interesting because you have McDermott there at number 4 ahead of Cade Povich. McDermott on the IL right now at Norfolk. Then Bradfield, who was recently promoted to Double-A Bowie. In fact, we're recording this on Monday night. That move was announced on Sunday after the game that he makes a jump from High A to Double-A. And then you have Vance Honeycutt, the Orioles' first-round pick from this year, followed by Beavers, Judd Fabian, and Luis De Leon. So this is a pretty interesting top 10. Not a ton of movement necessarily from the beginning of the season, except for De Leon making the big jump. We had him, I think, somewhere in the 20s preseason. Now he's up in the top 10, and you have Honeycutt, who is a new member of this organization. So as the two of you look at the rest of the top 10, what stands out to you?
I Love that there's just 4 outfielders back to back to back to back, 6 through 9. Bradfield, Honeycutt, Beavers, Fabian, and that's even with. Didn't we trade Billy Cook? There's plenty of talented outfielders in this system. Even if you lost to Matt Horvath, who could be considered an outfielder as well, even though he was playing some infield. I think, at least 1 or 2 of these guys are going to break through and make the major leagues with the Orioles, and it's a lot of talent there. Fabian, Bradfield, Honeycutt both have high ceilings. Floors are a little bit different levels depending on who you look at, and then Beavers is more of the right field power hitting outfielder if he can ever unlock everything at the same time. He's shown flashes, obviously. I feel like he's been mentioned in top 100 articles, but just for whatever reason hasn't been able to consistently put it over the course of a full season. So I think you see the depth in the outfield here, and you kind of start to see why this might be Cedric Mullins' last year or two with the Orioles, as awesome as Cedric Mullins is. And he's been great since June 1st, as he's been able to play mostly against right-handed pitching, his defense. But these are guys, Bradfield, Honeycutt, Fabian especially, who have tremendous defense, tremendous speed, stolen base ability, power from Honeycutt. And Fabian, Bradfield will steal you 100 bases if you let him. So, yeah, just very exciting crop of outfielders here. That was hard to differentiate between. Probably the hardest for me was, do I put Honeycutt over Bradfield? He's the new flashy toy in the toy box. Or do you go with the higher floor Bradfield? And Fabian's had a quietly great season as well. So just really, really fun outfield crop here.
It is a lot of fun, and even if they don't all pan out, which they're not going to, I go back to look at the trade deadline, and they were able to move Connor Norby and Kyle Stowers for Trevor Rogers. Like, if you're going to have that ammo, you're going to have many more infielders like that, and you're going to have these guys who, even among this crop, that maybe don't pan out in the next 2 years or so. You're going to have more outfielders like this, where you can continuously make trades like that to help fortify the fringes of your roster every trade deadline. But yeah, before I get to the outfielders and why I put my rankings that way, I think Luis De Leon, this section is where it starts to get really interesting. I think 10 down, but I mean, De Leon gets promoted to high A. He's still like 2 years younger than his peers down there in high A. And I just think the baseball card numbers don't look great since the promotion, but he's still running a ground ball rate near 60%. His FIP and XFIP are like a run and a half, almost 2 runs lower than his ERA. The BABIP's pretty high, and I think he's already vastly exceeded I think he's pitched more innings. He's almost pitched as many innings this year as he has his first 2 years combined. So I think De Leon is just, that arm is getting tired. He's a tremendous talent. I put McDermott over Povich, putting McDermott 4, Povich. Actually, I put Povich 6, but I put McDermott over Povich just because I think Cade Povich kind of, I know a lot of people have soured on him. Shocker, they're souring on all these guys, these prospects, getting brief tastes in the major leagues. But I think Povich is still a very solid, like, back into the rotation innings eater type arm. I think that's fine. McDermott, I think whether it's as a starter or a reliever, I think there's still a much bigger ceiling there, and I think he's going to be an impact arm for you in some role. The toughest choice was the Honeycutt, Bradfield, Fabian, Beavers, and where do you go? Because they're all kind of in that same mold also. Huge ceilings, loud tools, but massive question marks. I've actually been trying to be more reserved when it comes to the draft picks, the guys we initially trade for, some of the younger international prospects, just until we have the ability to really watch them and understand who they are. But Honeycutt, I just think he showed improvements this year at UNC. He's got this unknown the unknown upside, that unknown potential of what his hit tool could be now that he's in a major league organization. I went strictly upside there with that pick. There's a ton of risk there, but at the same time, if the Orioles are able to crack something with that hit tool, he's got the power, speed, and defense to be one of the better prospects in the game. I feel much more confident about Bradfield's bat now than I did 2 months ago. He's had a really tremendous season, especially, since he returned from the IL from that concussion earlier in the year. And then Beavers and Fabian was another tough one. I put Fabian ahead of Beavers just because the defense is elite, the power's for real. Strikeouts are down, but the hit tool still scares me because he's a little bit older. He's been in older in that he's been in double A for a long time at this point. And yeah, the walks are down, but strikeouts are also down and power's up. He's showing good signs. He's way further removed from this hardcore 3 true outcomes player he was last year. But I'm curious to see how, what is the hit tool ceiling there with Fabian? Is it going to continue to get better or not? And Beavers, if it does click, Fabian is a potential all-star at the major league level. Beavers just hasn't really shown. It's been an underwhelming season for Beavers this year, to be honest, especially after what he did last year in high A and in double A. He's got a lot of home runs this year. He's got 12 home runs, I think, but I feel like a lot of those home runs were concentrated early on in the year. I enjoy watching him. I think he's made growth in some areas, but he's a league average hitter this year. So that's why I put him down there at the tail end of those 4 outfielders. But I think it's a fun conversation to have on where you rank those 4 guys.
Yeah, and I completely agree with you on the pitchers. I had McDermott ahead of Povich, not because I soured on Povich, but like you said, I think I went with the upside in McDermott more than the higher floor in Povich. And yeah, I think there's a chance that McDermott could be a mid-rotation starter or a back-end reliever, which to me is, even if there's a chance that all he is a middle reliever, I feel like I'll take that upside over a say 4 or 5 starter, which I think Povich is in a good rotation. So, agreed.
Yeah, I'll start with the outfielders. What got a little bit tough for me is that I don't think there's a ton of separation right now between Bradfield, Beavers, Honeycutt, and Fabian. I don't know what has happened to Dylan Beavers since the end of May, because for the first 2 months, he was one of the best hitters all around in the Orioles farm system. And then we've just kind of seen a dive off that I can't quite explain. But in my mind, when I see Beavers at his best, he can get on base consistently. He hits for the kind of power that you look for from a corner outfielder. And his defense is far from elite, but I think it's serviceable. Fabian, an excellent defensive center fielder, and really where it came down, the harder question I had was Honeycutt over Fabian. The reason I went with Honeycutt by 1 spot is that I think the speed is better in comparison to Fabian, and that the tools across the board are just louder. So that even if Honeycutt doesn't develop much of a hit tool, I have a feeling he'll stick around a little bit longer in the majors than Fabian will, because Fabian, good defender, doesn't run as well as Honeycutt. Power maybe the same or slightly below where Honeycutt is at this point. So I feel like Honeycutt just has a louder set of tools, even though both players have question marks. And then as for Povich and McDermott, again, that is a coin flip. In my mind, I look at Povich more as a starter than I do McDermott. McDermott has now had back-to-back years where he's gotten hurt late in the season, and the stuff, frankly, may profile a little bit better out of the bullpen. I think both guys have high ceilings, and I think that McDermott can stay on the mound and continue to improve his command, that he can stick in a rotation. But Povich, that's a starter. He's going to stick in a major league rotation, and I know some people have soured on him, but I think that was largely due to a couple of rough starts that he had before he got an option in Norfolk. You got to remember, he went up against a very good Atlanta Braves lineup early on when he was promoted and won the Orioles that game. He had a few outings like that before his command seemed to falter a little bit. If he had pitched a little bit more consistently after that start against Atlanta, he would still be in the majors, and people would be talking about him a lot differently than they are right now.
And he wouldn't be eligible for this list.
Exactly. Yeah, we thought Povich was going to come off this list a month ago, but that is not the case. And it probably cost some guys a little bit further down an opportunity to crack the top 10. So now let's reveal those 11 through 20 spots.
Summer is supposed to be an opportunity to slow down, but when you look at your kids, you can't help but notice that your kids are growing up fast. Help them build independence as they grow with Greenlight. Greenlight is a debit card and money app for families where parents can keep an eye on kids' money habits while kids learn how to save, invest, and spend wisely. It's the easy, convenient way to raise financially smart kids. Get your first month free when you sign up at greenlight.com/pod.
Passion, drive, and patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home huge wins. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. See ebaymotors.com.
Shopify is the global commerce platform that helps you sell at every stage of your business. Shopify is there to help you grow. Shopify helps you sell everywhere, from their all-in-one e-commerce platform to their in-person POS system. Shopify's got you covered. Shopify helps you turn browsers into buyers with the internet's best converting checkout, 36% better on average compared to other leading commerce platforms, and sell more with less effort thanks to Shopify Magic, your AI-powered all-star. What I love about Shopify is how no matter how big you want to grow, Shopify gives you everything you need to take control and take your business to the next level. Shopify powers 10% of all e-commerce in the U.S., and Shopify is the global force behind Allbirds, Rothy's, and Brooklinen, and millions of other entrepreneurs of every size across 175 countries. Plus, Shopify's award-winning help is there to support your success every step of the way. Because businesses that grow with Shopify. Sign up for a $1 per month trial period at shopify.com/Westwood1, all lowercase. Go to shopify.com/Westwood1 now to grow your business, no matter what stage you're in. Shopify.com/Westwood1.
At number 11, we have right-handed pitcher Brandon Young, followed by a fellow right-hander, Pat or Patrick Riley, depending on which source you look at, recently acquired from the Pittsburgh Pirates. He's followed by Frederick Bencosme at 13th, Trace Bright at 14th, Michael Ferret, who has made a tremendous leap. Remember, he was not on our preseason top 50, and he's now 15th overall on our list. Edgar Portes, another guy that has made a big jump since the beginning of this year, follows him at 16th. Creed Willems putting together a nice year at Aberdeen offensively, follows him at 17th. Juan Nunez at number 18, a really good right-handed pitcher who unfortunately has been on the IL for a while now. Hopefully we see him on the mound before too long. He's followed at number 19 by Aaron Estrada, who has put together a phenomenal year between Delmarva and Aberdeen. And then at number 20, infielder Griff O'Farrell, the Orioles' recent draft pick out of UVA. He was their second player taken in this year's draft class. So, bit of an infusion here. You have O'Farrell, who was chosen in this year's draft, but you have a lot of guys like Portes and Ferret that have made significant jumps since the preseason. Players we've been talking about for a while now, in Bright and Willems and Bencosme as well, and then Riley, who recently came over from the Pirates. But I want to start with Brandon Young. He's stuck in the organization after the trade deadline, despite a lot of speculation. He could be a guy that the Orioles would dangle out there to get something in return at the deadline. He's going to be Rule 5 eligible this offseason. Barring any unforeseen circumstances, he has to be a lock to be protected at this point. And now he's starting to get a lot of national coverage. So, Bob, I'll start with you. Young was a guy that has been on our top 50 before, but it's generally been in that 30 to 40 range. And he started to creep up this year, and now he's at 11. What do you think is a realistic expectation for him going forward?
Well, he's definitely not going to be Rule 5 eligible by the time that rolls around. I could say that's safely, you can assume that. And now he's being uttered in the same sentence as Cade Povich and Chase McDermott when it comes to maybe contributing in the major leagues this year. At a recent press conference or a little reporter session that he did, he did say that Brandon Young is getting close. They think about, the same type of stuff that Michael Elias says when a guy's getting close to making his debut or at least coming back up. So that was exciting to hear. And clearly they liked the improvements he made enough and has sustained that up in AAA. That I think he's a legitimate in competition next spring for a starting pitching role on this team, along with Povich and McDermott. And yeah, he does things a little bit differently. He's got that high inverted break fastball that our former guest loved, Lance Brodsnowski. And it's been one of the funnest developments in following this minor league system for me since we started this podcast, going from undrafted free agent to on the radar to hurt, not knowing even what he was hurt with exactly. And now I think we know it was Tommy John. He recovered greatly, bounced back, and now he's a borderline top 10 prospect in what is still the number one farm system in baseball, at least until Jackson Holiday graduates.
Brandon Young is getting the Mike Elias tip of his tongue treatment that we always see. So I do think he is very close. That when Mike Elias talks about a guy in the minor leagues like that, I think it's got a perfect hit rate for seeing him in the major leagues pretty soon. Right now, like I said after the trade in the trade reaction show, I thought Brandon Young was a huge winner of their trade deadline because it felt like he's definitely like he could still be traded this offseason before the deadline to protect these guys, but I don't think so. I think he's in this organization because the Orioles like him. He's got a spike in walks since he got promoted to AAA, but that's of zero concern for me just because he got roughed up in one. It's a small sample, and he got roughed up in one of those outings. He couldn't find the strike zone. And I think it was he left the game after like an inning and 2/3 or something. And then it was reported that he was sick and removed from the game early because of that. So he immediately went back to looking back, right, like his old self, starting with his next outing. You also got the robo-ump impact. We talked about that with Chase McDermott and kind of comparing his weekday numbers versus weekend numbers, robo-umps versus no robo-umps. There's a pretty stark difference there with McDermott. Like he's got to be added to the 40-man roster this winter. And so I think why not just if you need that bullpen arm and you want a righty who can throw it in the mid to upper 90s with a couple of nice breaking balls thrown in there, why not give him a shot? He's either going to be added to the 40-man roster or traded this offseason. So I think we do see him in the majors at some point this year, especially. It's like that weird point of the year where the season's almost done, but at the same time, there's also like a ton of baseball left. You're going to need more bullpen arms, obviously. I think Brandon Young could be one of those younger guys that gets a shot.
Yeah, when I was looking at my list and I got down to like the 10 to 15 range, it was a tough decision between Young and De Leon. And of the three of us, I was the only one that had Young in the top 10 and De Leon outside the top 10. I had Young 10 and De Leon 11th. What separated Young from me is that I'm more confident at this point in him sticking as a starter, even though I believe that De Leon has a far higher ceiling than Young does. But De Leon is younger. He has not thrown a lot of innings professionally, whereas Young is on the mound right now looking like he deserves a shot to at least get a couple of major league innings before this year ends. And possibly, depending on what the Orioles do this offseason, compete for a back-end rotation spot. I agree with what both of you talked about with his command. I think that has looked really good this year, especially when put in the context that we have seen walk rates spike pretty significantly from AA to AAA. Young's has spiked, but it still is pretty good in comparison to what we've seen from other players with the robo-ump, with the change in baseballs. And he doesn't have elite stuff, but across the board, his pitch mix looks to me like a guy who can start in the major leagues. And let's go down the list now, and I want to go to Ferret, because I don't know that we have seen a player who has made this kind of jump within a season in a while. He was not on our preseason top 50, really didn't get on our radar until about May. And between Delmarva and Aberdeen this year, has put together really, really good numbers. And one theme that you might hear throughout the night is that we're seeing some command concerns with pitchers as the year goes on, especially younger guys. We're seeing it certainly with Luis De Leon. We're seeing it to some extent even with Trace Bright. And for Brett, you're still seeing it, but the strikeout numbers have still been pretty good at Aberdeen. So why do you guys think that he has been as successful as he has been this year? And now it's not just us talking about Ferret as a top 10 to 15 prospects in his organization. National outlets are noticing him as well.
To be fair, I think he was on our radar, but you're the pitcher. We didn't know who was going to break out and when. It just happened that he immediately caught our attention and has just consistently looked great throughout the entire season. I just think he's very young for a draft pick in that range that he was taken in. I think it goes a little bit under the radar, like his age compared to some other guys that are from the same draft. And he's just looked electric all season long and can't see the forest through the trees. He's number 15.
Yeah, I mean, it was going back to the whole thing. He worked out at Tread in the offseason, and they had right before he left to go to Sarasota, they put out the tweet about, the velo increases. He added like 3 or 4 ticks to his fastball since the Orioles drafted him, and he added weight, and they revamped his secondaries. And you're like, all right, I always take these tweets with a grain of salt. Like, let's see what these kids actually have in game action. It's one thing to do it in a confined lab, but what are you going to do out there in the field against other competition? And from the first start he made in Delmarva, it was very clear that this guy was just poised on the mound. He looked much different and beyond of what a lot of these other guys in Delmarva. When you watch these arms pitch in Delmarva, you see a lot of uncertainty. You see guys who it's like Ferret had a game plan and he was executing that game plan, and you don't see that a lot of times at the low A level, especially now when a lot of low A, it's 19-year-old, international prospects who are still very raw, still learning the game. But Ferret, I mean, he's 20 years old. So he's another year younger than De Leon, who I just said was 2 years younger than his peers in high A. Ferret's a year younger. The strikeouts are still, he's got like 54 strikeouts in like 40 innings or something. He's still pitching tremendously well. I mean, this guy, he's going to get bigger. I think I've said before, he made Blaine Knight look like he had some weight on him. He was so skinny. I think Ferret is going to be a guy who flirts with 100 miles per hour next year, honestly, within 2 years or so. He's going to get bigger. He's going to get stronger. That velo is going to tick up even closer to 100 miles per hour. Multiple breaking balls. I mean, I think this is a guy who, like John Mioli was on the show and was like, yeah, Michael Ferret's getting, like, you mentioned his name around the Orioles and within the organization. There's real buzz there. Like, guys light up when they talk about Michael Ferret, and we're seeing why. He's now one of the top pitching prospects in the system right now.
Let's dive a little bit into Pat Riley, the right-handed pitcher the Orioles recently acquired from the Pirates in a trade that sent Billy Cook over to Pittsburgh. And at the time of the deadline, this move flew under the radar a little bit because it's a prospect for prospects move. There's no major league players going to either team in the deal. Then we started to dig a little bit deeper into Riley and noticed that a lot of national outlets were pretty high on him. He'd been putting up good numbers in high A at Greensboro, the Pirates affiliate, and doing so in a hitter's haven. Greensboro is definitely a hitter's park, and he's putting up very good numbers there. The Orioles didn't even do what they did with Cade Povich and Chase McDermott a few years ago and give them those warm-up outings in Aberdeen. Riley went right to Double-A, and so far only been a couple of outings for him with the Bay Sox, but looking pretty good to this point. I have to be honest that until I sat down to actually do the list, I didn't expect Riley to be this high. I thought he might be in the 20 to 25 range. But when I started to look at him a little bit deeper and started to look at what he's done so far, dive into the reports that are out there and compare him to some of the other prospects in the Orioles system, I felt like he was not that far off from Jackson Baumeister, who the Orioles gave up to get Zach Eflin from the Rays. So I think that in that sense, his ranking here is pretty fitting because we had Baumeister in the 10 to 15 range for the better part of a year. So what are you guys thinking about Riley at this point?
I thought this was, like we talked about, was one of the top trades at the deadline, at least the most underrated trade at the deadline, because you moved multiple top pitching prospects for major league talent, which you needed to do. You can't just go out and acquire a bunch of pitching and not give up pitching in return. And the Orioles gave up a lot of good pitchers at the deadline, but they were able to replenish that instantly by trading away. Like, I know a lot of people really liked Billy Cook, and it's fine. He's made tremendous growth this year, but Billy Cook, I don't think, was going to contribute really in any way to the Orioles major league roster at any point. Riley is instantly plugged in as one of your top pitching prospects in the organization already. I said after the deadline, you watch him throw the one pitch and you see like he looks exactly like an Orioles pitching prospect. He's got that over the top delivery. Watching his outing the other day, he's got that fastball that just dominates the top of the zone. He's like a much more refined Jackson Baumeister already, and he's 22, and the Orioles plugged him in at Double-A as soon as he came over into the organization. So I think you look at his age, his production, and what level he's at, that should speak volumes about what the organization thinks about this kid. I think he is, honestly, I would not be surprised. Look at the list here. I would not be surprised if Riley is firmly within the top 10 of the system when we begin next season.
Yeah, the more I think about this trade, I'm like, what the hell were the Pirates thinking? Why did they trade this guy for Billy Cook? Like, it's not like Billy Cook immediately plugged into their major league team. I don't know. I'm grateful. I know that. I think the fact that the Orioles were willing to give up Jackson Ballmeister, not that they didn't like him, obviously they liked him, and then plug in Riley and immediately promote him to Double-A, which I think Ballmeister would have been promoted to Double-A fairly shortly if he wasn't traded. I think it just speaks volumes that they at least liked him as much as Ballmeister, if not more. And yeah, I think he's got some really nasty stuff. I've loved watching him pitch so far, and I hope to watch that continue. And I agree with Nick. I think he's a top 10 guy by the end of the year.
Want to teach your kids financial literacy but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/pod.
eBay Motors is here for the ride. Remember when you first saw the potential? And then through some elbow grease, fresh installs, and a whole lot of love, you transformed 100,000 miles and a body full of rust into a drive that's all your own? With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you can make sure your ride stays running smoothly. Brake kits, LED headlights, exhaust kits, turbochargers, bumpers, whatever your baby needs, eBay Motors has it. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, it's guaranteed to fit your ride the first time, every time, or your money back. Plus, at these prices, you're burning rubber, not cash. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. See ebaymotors.com.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it. Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
We'll move down to the 21 through 30 part of the list now, and I think this is going to give us an opportunity to obviously highlight some players we haven't to this point, but then talk about some of the differences in our list and how we arrived at those 10 or really 11 through 30 spots. So we'll go down now to number 21 on the list. That is Leandro Arias, young switch hitting infielder who was just promoted to Aberdeen. He was followed by Ethan Anderson, a catcher drafted out of UVA in this year's draft. Cameron Weston, one of the biggest risers in the system this year, comes in at number 23. He is followed by Alex Pham, who, after a really rough start to this year, has started to look like the pitcher that he was last year, getting plenty of swings and misses down at Double-A Bowie. Emilio Sanchez, who stands out among a lot of players of his type in this Orioles farm system, which is young, switch-hitting infielders who rarely ever strike out. Not as Sanchez rarely ever strikes out, he walks way more than he strikes out, and he's doing so at 16 years old. So he is 25th on our list. Zach Fruit, right-handed pitcher with a lot of good stuff, who has started to get more notice nationally, comes in 26th. He's followed by Thomas Sosa, switch-hitting outfielder currently down at Delmarva. Jordan Sanchez, another international assignee, ranks 28th on our list. Tavian Josenberger, who just made a jump up from Aberdeen to Bowie, comes in at 29th. And then Luis Almeida drops down a little bit from where he had been preseason. He is now 30th on our list. And much like last year for Almeida, it was a year with inconsistent results at the plate combined with some injury issues. However, if you want to look for a silver lining, he picked up the pace a little bit in the last couple of weeks of the FCL season. So this is an interesting part of the list in that you have a lot of guys with seemingly high ceilings, but some real question marks. And then for us individually, a little bit of variance in where we rank these players. So, Nick, I'll start with you. What kind of jumps out at you as you look at this group?
This group, I think, is pretty fun just because, I mean, Leandro Arias is a guy who, I go back to Fangraphs. As soon as he signed, Fangraphs jolted him up near the top of the organization in their rankings. They were obsessed with him. And he hasn't really shown that production this year at Delmarva. He had an injury, missed some time there. But still, it's been like, he's been one of those guys who's like flashed a little bit, but I did not expect him to be promoted to high A as he was today. I was prepared to come on and say, like, I was going to like wait till next year to make a strong stance on Arias and kind of, when you look at this scale, I think about this scale when I'm looking at these Delmarva guys. It's like, are they Creed Willems or are they Anderson De Los Santos? Are they Creed Willems because they're going to break out in this tremendous way in year two when they get that year two in Delmarva? Or is it going to be Anderson De Los Santos where it's like we maybe keep like pushing the goalpost a little bit and keep hoping there's a breakout, but there just never quite is, although we can talk about Anderson De Los Santos at the end of this list. But I firmly had Arias closer like to the Creed Willems side of the scale, and here he is like getting promoted to high A, and he's still only 19 years old, so I don't think that was a promotion of like we've got to clear the deck to get these college draft picks on the roster. They could have kept him on the bench in Delmarva, but instead they promoted him to high A. They've got more Noel Worth Romeros in this organization that they could have, filled Aberdeen's roster with, but they're promoting these, 19, 20-year-old international prospects pretty aggressively. So that's fun to see. I'd be curious to get some more information about how the organization views Arias, because I think that's interesting. Cameron Weston there at 23, I'm at 24, so right around the same spot. Still, no one is talking about this kid, and it's getting ridiculous at this point. He's in Double-A, striking out 30% of the hitters he's facing. He has a 6% walk rate, and he's got fewer ground balls. Like the ground ball rate has dropped by 10%, yet he's still been uber effective at the Double-A level. I think this is a potential starting pitching prospect. I think he's more than just like a ground ball specialist reliever. I think there's real juice here. This is his first fully healthy year in pro ball, and he is as quietly as you can, just excelling. Like he could end the year in AAA, to be honest. He's earned that at this point. And I would probably say he's probably too low on this list right now, if I'm being honest. But for me, the biggest riser, like Pham, like you mentioned, solid. My assessment on Pham, Fruit hasn't changed. Emilio Sanchez, I love the 45 walks to 33 strikeouts is just amazing. But the biggest jumper for me was Tavian Josenberger. I bumped him up a good bit. I have him 27th on my list, so a little bit higher there. I talked about it a lot on last week's episode. I made my case for him there, and he immediately hit another home run and was promoted to Double-A since then. So like, I feel like he was a pick that a lot of people didn't like, or just, I don't know, didn't seem excited by after the draft last year, which made me like him even more. Like, why? Like, why? I want to see this guy succeed. What is this about him? There's something there. I know Joe Doyle kind of sold me on him a little bit when we had him on. And then you watch this kid play, and it was a rough start to the year, man. But that power is shining through with Josenberger. He's fun to watch defensively. The power is there from the left side. It was like this. The stats in his gameplay never matched through the first 70% of the season. And now here, there's only like 3-4 weeks left of the year in the minor leagues, but the stats and gameplay are finally matching for him. I'm stoked to watch him in Double-A. I'm excited to see where he plays, because now they have like Fabian, Beavers, Josenberger, Bradfield, like John Rhodes is still there. Like there's a lot of talented outfielders. Josenberger, we know, can play on the dirt, so I wonder if he sees some more infield run now that he's in Bowie. But Josenberger is quickly becoming one of my favorite prospects, especially with this little breakout that he's having to close out his time in Aberdeen.
Great call outs there. I'd like to go back to number 19, Aaron Estrada, who I have all the way up as my number 14 prospect in the system. just shout out to him for getting promoted to Aberdeen and just continuing to produce. Like, didn't miss a beat. I just think, and he's super young too. What is he, 18? 19?
18 or 19.
Yeah, I mean, just to me, the power he's showing, yeah, obviously he's a little bit of a smaller guy than you get out of your prototypical power hitter, but I mean, the ball jumps off his bat, and he's just a natural born hitter, a la Frederick Ben Cosme. I think he's Ben Cosme with power, probably not as good defensively, but I love this style of player, and I'm hoping he continues to produce. When you talk about Leandro Arias, I think it's a tools over production thing. I think he's got all the tools to be that breakout guy, a la Aaron Estrada, when it comes to the stat line. It just hasn't happened for whatever reason, but he's still got a great approach. He's got great tools, power, hit tool, and can play good defense. I think the organization, I have a feeling the organization's high on him, and I think we saw that with the promotion. Cameron Weston, yeah, I think he's got to be the most underrated pitcher in the system, maybe even by me. Number 19 for me, but he just continues to produce, and at some point that's got to count for something. Edgar Portes, I like seeing him jump up 14 spots. Again, higher than Weston. Probably Weston would contest that, but I think Portes has tremendous stuff, and he's just continued to refine that. Zach Fruit jumps 21 spots all the way up to number 26. Obviously, a lot of that is trades and stuff like that, but just consistent season. I feel like he's gotten better as the year's gone on, and I agree, Josenberger, again, tools over production. Like, you can see if he puts it all together what he could be capable of, and I think we started to see that over the last couple of weeks, and hopefully a fresh start in a more hitter-friendly confines of Bowie will end the year on a high note. And yeah, Thomas Sosa, by the way, also promoted to high A. That was cool to see. I think could be an adventure in high A for him, at least to end the season, because he's so raw, but the tools are just tremendous. And yeah, I might have to get down to the Ironbird Stadium just to see if he can get a hold of one while I'm there in person, because he's a fun player to track here as we move forward.
Going back to Josenberger, I had made the point earlier in the season that he was one of those prospects that kind of confused me, because he seemingly does everything right, but the stat line doesn't really reflect that. He can play up the middle. He runs really, really well. His speed does not get enough credit. He's been one of the most efficient base stealers in this organization since he was drafted last year. And, you know, there were questions about the power, and I don't see him being a power hitter going forward, but it's no small achievement to get out of Aberdeen hitting 9 home runs in about 2/3 of a season. Overall, he was actually a better hitter in Aberdeen this year than he was on the road. I don't think that means anything, but that was something that jumped out at me. But Nick, to go back to your point where it's like maybe some people were underwhelmed, I almost feel like this might be a case where the reports on Josenberger last year were so specific and perhaps accurate that no one wanted to hear that the player who was chosen 5th overall in this draft class is probably going to be a bench player down the road who's going to be a utility guy. No one wants to hear that. And I think Josenberger has the potential to be a little bit more than that. But let's think about if he does end up as someone who's going to play on the bench. He plays up the middle. He runs really well. He never takes a bat at bat. He can walk. He doesn't have great power, but it's, you know, he's not going to be overmatched necessarily in that area. He's going to hit some home runs from time to time, certainly a doubles hitter. So I don't think people realize how hard it is to find a player with that kind of profile. And that if you can get someone who is your 5th infielder or your 4th outfielder who has that skill set, it's a really good player.
Yeah, he played a lot of, I think he started the year primarily at second base, but he moved back into the outfield down in there in Aberdeen. Again, interested to see where he plays defensively now that he's in Bowie with how that roster is constructed, but he can play center field. He can play second base. He can play the corner outfield spots. He kind of does it all there. And yeah, the speed, like Enrique Bradfield Jr., Tavian Josenberger, and Reed Trimble, that's 131 stolen bases that Bowie just added to their roster. And Reed Trimble, we'll talk about him in a minute, has never been caught stealing in his career. He's a perfect 38 for 38. Just massive speed from all three of those guys, especially Josenberger. But this whole section here, I feel like this is where we really start getting like super excited about guys, because identifying these future gems, the guys who are going to break out, not everybody gets super interested by these guys at the lower levels and lower down the list, but this is where I live. And like you see guys like even Jordan Sanchez is another guy who, like, you look at his numbers. I don't have his numbers here. I had him 31. He's 28 on our list. I had a little bit lower on him, but I'm still a Max Wagner sympathizer a little bit. But like Jordan Sanchez is 18 years old, the Cuban prospect. He's hitting 333 with an OPS over 1,000. He's got 6 home runs. He has 23 walks to 31 strikeouts. So he's a big time power hitting prospect without the swing and miss concerns that like Thomas Sosa and Steven Martinez have. But I don't see like any hype around him nationally. I haven't seen any. Like Baseball America's done a tremendous job, especially this year, about doing like deeper dives and data-driven articles on a lot of the DSL prospects. They've sent guys other than Ben Badler to the Dominican Republic to watch guys who have been at Orioles camp watching guys. And Jordan Sanchez still doesn't get the shout out. I think the box score line is, I don't think it's a farce. And this guy is going to be a pretty fun prospect to watch, again, because he doesn't have the swing and miss concerns that some of these other power hitting, corner outfielders do. Like Sosa promotion to high A was shocking. And I'm a big Thomas Sosa guy, but I was shocked to see that. I did not think he was ready. And, we'll find out. But I think it does lead to this whole section. We see more international guys. And Bob asked us the question last week when he was on vacation. He threw it in the Discord. We talked about Keeler Morphe, who can't wait to talk about him in a minute. But we talked about Keeler Morphe getting that bump up from the DSL to Delmarva. And then Bob asked, hey, do we see Jordan Sanchez get promoted once the DSL season ends in a couple of days here? Do we see some of these other guys who are performing really well in the DSL? And I've been thinking about that a lot. And it's like, I'm very curious to see if some of these guys, especially now after seeing Estrada and Leandro Arias and Thomas Sosa get promoted, I'm very curious to see if that becomes more of a trend with the Orioles. We know they like to be aggressive. We know they changed up their habits after they eliminated short season ball. They got very aggressive with their younger prospects. I'm almost curious now that the FCL season ends when the draft comes, if maybe that does become the norm. I don't think Keeler Morphe, as much as I love him, I don't think he's this superstar special unicorn prospect that they're like, we've got to get up to low A immediately. I think the Orioles are going to start challenging these top younger international prospects in a fun way. So I don't know if you guys have thought about that anymore since then, but
yeah, my reasoning, I think I could see Jordan Sanchez especially getting that chance once their season ends is because he's 18, not 16, 17, like a lot of the guys in DSL. I just wonder if guys like Keeler Morphe was his second time in the DSL. So if second-year players or a little bit older players might get that opportunity, if they want to see these guys continue to get official innings and at-bats, I mean, of course they could send them to the complex in Florida and their tricky league action there. But if you want to challenge them, like you said, and why not? Because FCL season's over. Delmarva is kind of FCL, the rich man's version of the FCL. So, yeah, why not? I love the idea of guys like Cartaya and Morphe getting a shot in Delmarva to end this year, and would like to see more of it. But we'll see if that's a trend that will continue.
Want to teach your kids financial literacy but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/pod.
If you're a facilities manager at a warehouse and your HVAC system goes down, it can turn up the heat, literally. But don't sweat it, Grainger has you covered. Grainger offers over 1 million industrial-grade products for all your operations, including warehouse HVAC maintenance. And even better, they offer access to experts and fast delivery, so you and your warehouse can both keep your cool. Call 1-800-GRANGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Of our list. And again, this is where things get interesting because we have a little bit of a split in the way that we see things. And then some places where you could, argue that some guys should be higher in comparison to others. Number 31, Kyle Brnovich. Remember, Brnovich acquired as part of the Dylan Bundy trade with the Angels a few years ago. He's back healthy this year, pitching at Double-A Bowie after having Tommy John surgery earlier in the 2022 season. He's followed by Trey Gibson, who has been a quick riser this year, an undrafted free agent last year who put up very good numbers at Delmarva. Before being promoted to Aberdeen, he's basically picked up where he left off at low A since arriving with the Ironbirds. Joshua Lorenzo, a young infielder with a lot of power potential, comes in at number 33. He's followed by Max Wagner, who is struggling this year with injuries and did not put up great results during his time at Bowie. But Nick said he's a little bit of a Max Wagner sympathizer, so we're going to throw the question to him here in a few minutes to get into why. But then Steven Martinez checks in at 35th, a young outfielder with a lot of raw power. He's followed by Elvin Garcia, who was not on our preseason top 50, but is starting to get some notice nationally. He's putting up a phenomenal year down the DSL. Reed Trimble, after a few years battling injuries, he has been on the field more this year, putting up very good results. He comes in 37th on our list. He's followed by Austin O'Verne, an outfielder out of USC, who the Orioles drafted this year. O'Verne ranks 38th. Nestor Herban, a right-handed pitcher chosen by the Orioles in the 2023 draft, comes in 39th. Herman had an injury early in the year. He came back from that at Delmarva, pitched very well, recently was promoted to Aberdeen, showing very good stuff. And then Brylan Tavera, the prize acquisition in the Orioles 2022 international free agency class, has battled some injuries at Delmarva this year and has struggled with his production a little bit when healthy. He drops down to 40th on our list. He's been a guy that for a while has ranked kind of in the 20 to 30 range, more precisely probably the 25 to 30 range for us. He's now down at number 40, but injuries are playing a role there. So, and I think that is a little bit of a theme in this section of the list because you have Trimble, who has been on and off the IL for a few years now. You have Wagner, who has an injury right now. And then you have Tavera, who's been off and on the IL a couple of times at Delmarva this year. And Nick, I know you want to talk a little bit about Wagner, so I want you to start there. But as you look at this group of players where we have injury concerns, what do you see from them going forward?
This one is tough because there are a couple of guys that's like, I don't want to take them off the list. I don't want to drop them too much because some guys I think still deserve another shot. Other guys, though, it's like, we'll talk about Brnovich here in a second, but with Max Wagner, I kept him at 29 on my personal list just because like he showed us enough, I feel like, last year to keep him on the radar. He didn't have an offseason because he had the hamate bone surgery in like December. He had multiple injuries this year that ultimately I think his season's done. I don't think he's coming back this year. He's a younger guy. He's still only 22 years old. But he was a younger guy. He was one of the younger guys in his draft class, cold weather prospect. We talked about that a lot. I think he deserves one more shot next year in Bowie to see what he's got, although he's really got to turn it on next year. I just I kept him around that 29-30 range just to, I think, one more shot. I think he does deserve. It was tough because you got Elvin Garcia. I had at 30, and Elvin Garcia, I mean, this is, again, another international signing from this 2024 class who's OPSing like almost 1,000. And more walks and strikeouts. But it's like some of the other guys on this list, like Brnovich, I put Brnovich all the way down at 47 on my list. I don't know what you guys think about Brnovich. I think he's been completely passed over in this organization. I'm kind of out, to be honest. He was in AAA when he had Tommy John surgery. He's been fully healthy for a long time now and is still in AA. Even when he was pitching at his peak this season, they didn't promote him to AAA. I honestly don't think he's back with the organization next year. I kept him at 47, but honestly, there are a lot of other younger arms that I would have preferred to put on the list. That was a tough one for me. Tavera is another tough one just because like I dropped him. He's 38 on my personal list, so he's a little bit higher than our final list, but he doesn't have a home run this year. He's hitting just 158. I know he's had multiple injuries as well, but there are a lot of these other younger international guys who have completely bypassed him, and they're in high A now, like we just talked about. I know the organization, at least entering this year, was high on him. Can't speak to if that's changed or not over the last 3 months, but like that's been a very underwhelming year from Tavera. He still is just 19 years old though at this point, so we'll see. But yeah, it's Trimble, just unbelievable what he's doing. I was going to say he's back, but he was never really here because he had 2 major injuries that completely decimated his career to this point. The last 2 years he's ended in a hospital bed instead of the field. He was drafted 65th overall, and now he's showing power, speed. He plays on the dirt. He plays center field defense when he was in college. Now he's been promoted to AA and OPSing well over 800 this year in Aberdeen, showing the power. It's 29 walks to 35 strikeouts. I'm happy for Trimble, and I'm excited to see where that goes. So that's a positive guy coming back off injury. But the other guys, I'm having a hard time, like Tavera, Branovich. I'm having a hard time on keeping those guys where they are on my list.
Yeah, that's a good point. For me, Branovich, I'm still a believer as of now. I do agree that he's on the verge of being passed over by quite a few arms, but I'm holding out hope that there's a reason that they haven't promoted him to AAA. I mean, they promoted Carlos Tavera to AAA, for goodness sakes, over him. So I don't know. I'm holding out hope. He might come crashing down my list soon. We will see. But I definitely see your argument there. Joshua Lorenzo, talk about a guy who's coming back from injury, got a late start to the FCL, didn't show off the power that we know he has in the FCL season this year, but was just nice to see him get back on the field and perform. He's still super young, super talented, a lot of upside, so look forward to him in Delmarva next year. Hats off to Ray Trimble. Cue the Undertaker gif of just coming back from the dead, because I thought when he went down early this season with an injury, I was like, goodness gracious, it's officially over. But no, he came roaring back, so hats off to him. Like, that has to take a lot of determination and hard work, so love that for him, and I hope it just is all uphill from here, all good from here, and he can maybe just be the guy that we thought John Rhodes could be. I don't know, but love to see it. And Nestor German, I mean, from unknown to just dominant, and now it's translating perfectly to high A Aberdeen. That's what you want to see. Yeah, Tavera for me, still some upside there, obviously, but you got to see it at some point, and hopefully that's next year after a restart, but time will tell. I'm starting to lose. I'll say I'm losing more faith in Tavera than I am in Luis Almeida, who I thought came on really strong at the end of the year and had the low BABIP beyond that. So, yeah, I'm holding out hope. Just like with Max Wagner, you want to give him one more year? I'm giving Braylon Tavera one more year.
Yeah, I think it's a good comparison with Almeida and Tavera. And then for Branovich, I've gone back and forth on him this year. I have to be honest, it's been a little bit tough because early in the year, he was walking way more hitters than I'm used to seeing him walk. And that was despite the fact that his strikeout numbers and his stuff didn't seem any different than what he had shown in the past. Then the walks have started to come down some over the last few months, but the strikeouts haven't been there. And I think it is fair to question why he hasn't been promoted. I think the results overall have been a little bit better than, say, a guy like Seth Johnson was before he was moved. But at the same time, Branovich is going to be Rule 5 eligible for a third time this offseason. And I'm not very confident that he's going to be protected by the Orioles, let alone chosen by another team. I hold on to him inside my personal top 30. I had him at 28th because I do think that if he can put it all together, there's a starter's mix there with the fastball, the knuckle curveball, and the changeup, that he can at least be a bulk innings guy out of the bullpen who could spot start for you from time to time. But there's no doubt that the consistency has to get back to what it was pre-injury. And then as for the other players on this list, I want to give Almeida the benefit of the doubt just because of how young he is. With Wagner, I think that perhaps he's been rushed a little bit because although he is a college player who was chosen out of a major program at Clemson, he came from a cold weather state, really didn't come on as a starter until his final year at Clemson. And now you add in the injuries. I don't want to say he should start next year at a lower level, but I do think the Orioles might need to play it a little bit slower with him than they would with other college picks. I have him at 31 on my list because I do think that there's some value there if he can put everything together. There's some defensive versatility. He can bounce back and forth between second and third, has some power, but again, it's just a matter of staying on the field. And Trimble, despite the fact I have him 33rd on the list, I was really close to putting him back inside my top 30. The only reason that I didn't was that he just has not been on the field a whole lot. And this is, a question I want to get into at the end of our list. But availability for me is starting to become a little bit more of a factor as I do these things. And Trimble has only had 130 professional games since being drafted 3 years ago. And I just hope that he can stay healthy for a prolonged stretch, because we're seeing this year what he can do when he's on the field.
Yeah. This section is a lot of fun because of those injury concerns. These guys bounce back, and then are they now fighting to be back into the top 30? Or what trajectory do they go on? I do agree with Branovich. I guess the final point I'll make there is why I have him so low. I do agree with the point you guys made about his skill set. It's not an issue of skill set with me. I think what influenced my rankings so much with Branovich is how I think the organization has just passed him over. And because he is 26 years old and he's still in AA, but I have a soft spot for Branovich because I will clearly remember that day the Orioles scouted him. And I feel like that was the day when he pitched at JMU in the CAA championship series, his last year at Elon. I'm pretty sure that scout, I don't know how he survived wearing all black, long sleeve, little zip up, quarter zip up, and jeans in one of the hottest days I've ever experienced in my life here. And the Orioles eventually traded for him and got his guy, thank God. But I just think it's the organization just kind of passed him by a little bit. But if we can end this section on a high note, my guy here is Trey Gibson. I just think, talk about a breakout arm here. He's up to 97, at least from what I've seen. Maybe he's been a little bit higher. Don't know. He has multiple breaking balls. He's 6'5", 240 is what he's listed at. I think he's a strikeout and ground ball artist, first of all. The ground ball rate's well above 50%. The strikeout rate has been through the roof. He got promoted to high A already. He's had one rough outing since he got promoted to Aberdeen, and it was his second outing. And I think I had a daily the next day, and I talked about it was the longest break he had in between outings. It was at 11 a.m., and it was his second high A start. He immediately rebounded his next time out. So he proved me right there. I also think, De Leon, the arm's probably just getting tired because he's up to 70 innings already, and he did not pitch last year, except for a couple innings with, after he got selected by the Orioles or signed by the Orioles as an undrafted free agent. But he did not pitch last year in college because he got suspended. He's already up to 70 innings, so I think next year you unleash the reins a little bit, and this is a 6'4", 6'5", 240. That is a workhorse body right there. And I think he could potentially be that kind of arm for this system. It's to have him this low in the organization. You traded a lot of top pitching prospects, but when we can talk about guys like Gibson and Nestor Herman and some other guys we're going to talk about in the back end of this list, I think the pitching program's sitting pretty right now, even after all those trades.
Yeah, I love Trey Gibson as well. And if anything, he's taught me never doubt Chris Resvetar's pitching opinions. Come to the Discord. He catches one every once in a while. He called Juanis and Charles Flame out, and he called Trey Gibson breakout. So hats off to him. I'm a big Gibson fan as well now.
Want to teach your kids financial literacy but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/pod.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, Dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Yeah, Gibson and Herman certainly have made big jumps. And now we'll go down to the final part of our top 50, which is the 41 through 50th rankings. And there are some players you really need to keep your eye on in here, and some names you've probably heard before who are a little bit lower than they have been before for various reasons. We'll start in with Kiefer Lord, 41st on this list, has really good stuff, but unfortunately because of injury, we have not seen him on the field this season. He's followed by Keeler Morphe, who Nick alluded to earlier as being a breakout prospect. He recently made the jump from the DSL to Delmarva. 5'8" right-hander who throws really hard, shows really a lot of promise on the mound. We're going to talk about him in just a moment. He's followed by Justin Armbruster at 43rd. Now, Armbruster has had one of the more bizarre seasons of any prospect in the Orioles farm system. Got off to a horrible start, was really bad basically through the end of June. Has started to look more like his old self in the last few months. Now, mind you, Armbruster had consistently been a guy that was inside our top 25. He's all the way down at 43, but there's maybe some glimmers of hope. I don't know. I'll ask Bob and Nick about that in a few minutes. He's followed by Levi Wells, who got off to a slow start and then was hurt for a little bit at Aberdeen this year, but has looked much better since coming off the IL. Juan Rojas, another pitcher who has battled injury issues, checks in at 45th on this list, a young left-hander, currently down at Low A Delmarva. Anderson De Los Santos, a hitter who puts up very good batted ball data, but has not had the most consistency in terms of results. Currently at High A Aberdeen, he is 46th on our list. Carter Baumler. Every time I do this episode, the top 50 update, I say just stay healthy. Baumler was on the mound for a little bit this year, again, back on the IL. He is now 47th on our list. And then we have some newcomers to the list, rounding out the top 50. Number 48, right-handed pitcher Blake Money, who has been one of the most consistent and most effective starters down at Low A Delmarva this year. He's followed by Gibber Cartea, who another guy like Morphe, breaking out late. Difference between Morphe and Cartea. Cartea is a few years older. He's had a couple of stints in the FCL, but has phenomenal stuff. Now getting a chance to show that off in Low A. And then at number 50, the first high school player taken in the Orioles 2024 draft class, switch hitting infielder DJ Layton. Now, this is an interesting section of the list for a lot of reasons, because you have some guys, like I mentioned, that have been higher before that are now pushed down because they've either been hurt or just have not performed consistently this year. And then you have some other guys that have never been on this list before. So, Bob, where do you want to start with this section of the list?
We got to start with Keeler Morphe. I mean, this kid, for all my short kings out there, he is a stud. Just lightning arm. Yeah, I think this guy, if he's going to pitch like this, he's top 30, top 20 this time next year. I don't know what the ceiling holds for him, because, my goodness, if they're going to come up with an international arm like this a year, I'm excited about it. I don't know what else to say. He's been awesome. Yeah, you got to love that. Yeber Cartaya is like a foot taller, and he's older, but I think he's shown a lot of promise as well. He strikes out a ton of batters. Blake Money has been good all year. He was a little bit unlucky in the beginning of the year, and now I feel like it's all his FIP and XFIP are kind of lining up with his ERA, and I think the fact, again, I've said it before, but the fact that he started opening day for Delmarva says a lot. Would like to see him up in Aberdeen at some point, because not sure what else he has to prove down in Delmarva. DJ Layton, yeah, I don't think we'll see him until next year, but it's exciting. And Baumler, this might be his last month on this list, I have a feeling. But yeah, year of the pitcher, Justin Armbruster, I think. Is there hope? Yeah, I think there's hope, but maybe more of a bullpen arm at this point for me. But yeah, it's been a rough year. but we'll give him one more. See what he's got in the tank. I don't think he's getting taken in the Rule 5, so I think he'll be back next year and see what he can do.
There's still, you're talking about the 40 through 50 on our list here, and I think you've still got 3 very intriguing arms on this list, and some more, like especially international arms that didn't crack this top 50 that are going to be pretty interesting to listen to. But yeah, with Morphe, like where do we find my thing here? Let's just look at his numbers. He's way up on my list. That's why I can't find him. I had him 37 on my list. I had to pump the brakes too. I wanted to put him higher, but I pumped the brakes a little bit, get some more looks, get some more data on him first. But like, this kid was sitting 97 miles per hour, not touching 97. He was sitting 97 miles per hour in one of his last starts in Delmarva. And then in like the 4th inning, decided to fire off a couple 100s before being removed in the 4th inning of that game. He gets promoted to Delmarva. I keep thinking like they're making mistakes. Ever since the whole Anderson De Los Santos got released thing last year, I'm always skeptical about, did the Orioles really make this move when you look at the transaction log? And to see Keeler Morphe assigned to Delmarva, I did not believe it. Well, he pitched for Delmarva the other day, and it was 3 scoreless innings with 7 strikeouts, 1 hit allowed. Unbelievable. Like, shout out to John Mioli for the shout out in the Baltimore Banner as well. Link in the Substack post. Just, real recognize real there, I guess. John's great. John, go subscribe to the Baltimore Banner. Shout out to them for including that. I'm excited. I hope John does get down to Delmarva, or up to Salisbury to check out Morphe. I want to hear John's thoughts after watching him pitch, because I'm blown away. I need somebody to bring me down a little bit, and that's going to be very hard to do. This kid, this time last year, he was 17 years old in the Dominican Summer League with an ERA over 7 and 25 strikeouts in 25 innings, but 21 walks. That is absurd. And now he's in Delmarva striking 7 and 3 scoreless innings. I love that. Yeber Cartaya, he's another one of my new favorite arms to watch, just because we're getting all this infusion of new guys we haven't seen in Delmarva, and we're getting to the end of the year, so that's what makes it a lot more exciting. Cartaya kind of, to me, looks like a baby giraffe trying to walk, like some tall animal calf trying to learn how to walk. It just looks weird. It looks awkward because he's so tall, and it's like all upper body. But I think this is still a guy who they're going to work with, and the stuff, like Zach mentioned, is really good. I've watched both of his starts with Delmarva so far. I've been impressed. And I still think Juan Rojas is interesting. He's still only 20 years old, which is hard to believe. And he's finally healthy and putting together a healthy season. So he could start next year in Delmarva again, but I still think Rojas is interesting and could be one of the first arms promoted if that's the case. Again, the Jorge Lopez trade is just the trade that keeps on giving. And then Levi Wells, I think, is still interesting. He's 44 on our list. I got scared because he missed, about a month with a shoulder injury. We know those are scary injuries, which is why when we found out last week for sure that Brandon Young had Tommy John surgery and it wasn't a shoulder injury, it was like, thank God it was Tommy John. But Levi Wells had a shoulder issue, was still having walk issues like he had in college before the injury. He's come back. He's only pitched 3 innings and 2 outings. I think they're easing him back in. But if he can rein in that control, I think Levi Wells climbs up this list as well. So you're talking about 40 through 50 on this list, but multiple arms. And Kiefer Lord had Tommy John surgery. That one sucks. He didn't pitch last year after being drafted. He didn't pitch this year because he tried to come back. Multiple times he tried to come back and just couldn't. Finally had surgery. So we may not see Kiefer Lord next year either. That's going to be tough after missing 2+ years if he can return to form. But he was one of the more intriguing arms in last year's draft class. So multiple arms in this 40 to 50 range that I'm pretty excited to see where their development takes them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And if Lord had been healthy, he would have been on my personal top 50 and frankly, probably within the top 35, top 30 spots, because I think his stuff is a lot better than some of the pitchers that are ahead of him on this list. But health is a factor there. As for Cartaya and Morphe, I am really excited to see what both of these guys can do as they round out their seasons. And with Morphe, Nick, you and I talked about this last week. despite him being small for a pitcher, he's listed at 5'8", 160. He looks like he might be a little bit bigger than that, but not by much. He doesn't have a violent delivery, and he throws really hard. So that, to me, is a sign that that's something you can build off of with hopefully not a ton of risk. Pitching prospects come with risk that's inherent to their profiles. But I think if the Orioles can kind of bring him along the way that they brought Luis De Leon along, he could really shoot up this list in the next year or so. Now, as for the guys that have kind of come down here a little bit, I want to talk about Armbruster for a minute before we wrap up. He has looked like the Justin Armbruster of recent vintage in the last couple of months, but he got off to a really slow start this year. There's no doubt about that. Where do you guys ultimately see him settling in? Does he look like he's closer to the pitcher that he was at the beginning of this year, who was having a hard time locating his fastball and often seeing hitters square up on it, or the guy we've seen later on in the year where he's really mixing in his pitches well, locating them, and getting the kind of results that he has in the past?
For me, to be honest, I don't know. I'm just going to be honest and say I don't really know what's going on there, and I would love to know something more certain because, again, he's a guy who there's a lot written about him over the last 2 years about like Armbruster being the guy, and go back to like John Muley's Arms on the Farm series that he started last year, which was tremendous to highlight the depth and growth of the pitching development in this organization. And Armbruster is one of the first guys he acknowledged in that, like, Armbruster's kind of paving the way for a lot of these arms. And I do think overall Armbruster, I have Peter Van Loon 49 on my personal list there. And I think Peter Van Loon is in this Armbruster mold in that neither of those guys were like highly touted coming out of the draft. They're like somewhat interesting, but I don't think anybody was like ever super excited about either of them coming out of the draft. But the development that they've made since then is noticeable and should be like celebrated. They've done a lot. Justin Armbruster, I did not imagine being part of AAA Norfolk's rotation when he was first drafted. I thought maybe you teach him a slider, and he's a fastball slider reliever, big guy, powerful fastball. But now he's a AAA starter. I don't know what went wrong to begin this year. He has looked better. But I do agree that like the fastball traits are good. The secondaries, he's revamped them. He's developed those. They've gotten better. He's ditched old pitchers. He's added new ones to fit his style and to find success. It just hasn't all come together for him. I wish I knew exactly what was going on there with him, but I do think there's still a little bit of optimism to be had there with Armbruster that he can fulfill some sort of role at the major league level.
Yeah, it's like I said, I think maybe he's becoming more of a relief prospect just because there's so many awesome arms on this farm system. I think maybe like he's still got a really solid fastball when it comes to shape. So if you can just ride with that, ramp it up out of the bullpen and pick your favorite breaking ball or two and see how that goes. That's kind of the route I would take. But yeah, not giving up on him, but just kind of a lost year. Just hopefully he can find it before next year comes back around.
Now, before we wrap up, I want to ask a question that's more about general philosophy. We have been doing this for several years now, and I think this list is kind of consistent in the way that we evaluate things and how it shakes out in the rankings, where usually our top 15 to top 20 are pretty much aligned, but then when you get past the 20, that's where you start to see more variance. So I want to ask you guys, and I'll start with Bob. What factors did you consider this year that you put together as you put together your personal top 50, and has it been any different than the way you've done it in the past?
It's a good question. I think the thing I've done a little bit differently, especially as the year has gone on, is these big international signings, highly touted guys for big money. I'm just being way more conservative, and I'm going to start them lower. And if they're not performing, I'm going to have to drop them because there's so much depth here. There's so much guys that come out of nowhere that sign for nothing that, yeah, maybe they weren't touted at 15 years old or whatever when they signed it, but they're out there doing the work, and even draftees and everyone. Like, I want to value performance, obviously, to an extent. Obviously, it's tools, it's upside, but I want to make them earn it a little bit when it comes to the international side, which obviously we had to get used to and grow into, along with the organization as a whole, with Kobe Perez and Michael Elias taking over. So I'd say that's my biggest difference this year. I'd have to think about that more as a personal overall question. I think just constantly trying to weigh the upside and the floor and how far away someone is versus, could they perform in the major leagues relatively soon, even if it's as on a bench role or a relief pitcher that still has value. Like Keegan Gillis is number 16 on the MLB pipeline list, and I'm like, am I messing up? Because I like Keegan Gillis, but he's not in my top 50. So is that a me thing? Should I be trying to fixing things like valuing a middle relief prospect more? I don't know, but I'm always trying to improve. So always tinkering and trying to improve my way of evaluating.
Want to teach your kids financial literacy but not sure where to start? Greenlight can help. With Greenlight, parents can keep an eye on kids' spending and saving, while kids and teens use a card of their own to build money confidence. As a parent, you can send instant money transfers, set up chores, automate allowance, and more. It's a convenient way to run your household, customized to your family's needs, and the easy way to raise financially smart kids. Get started with Greenlight today and get your first month free at greenlight.com/pod.
At your job, do you ever have to deal with a nose roller? How about a snub pulley? Well, if you're installing a new conveyor belt system, dealing with the different components can sound like you're speaking a foreign language. Luckily, you've got a team ready to help. Grainger's technical product specialists are fluent in maintenance, repair, and operations. So whenever you want to talk shop, just reach out. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
Guys,
it's fun. I don't think there's a right answer for how we do this. Why every list is, well, you see a lot of lists and they're pretty much the same, and that's annoying. It's just people copying and pasting each other. And then I think it's fun to be different, but you don't need to be different just to be different. Like, I take big stands on guys, and especially now, I feel a lot more comfortable in understanding this Elias regime and understanding we've seen what works already with like just the hitters. We've seen what works with these hitters and what they value and what they look for. And then what weaknesses guys like Mayo and Cowser and Kerstad and all these guys, what weaknesses they had in the lower levels of the minor leagues and what the organization was really able to improve on with them. And then when I look at these guys now, it's like, okay, what are their weaknesses? Do they match up? Do their strengths match up? How do they compare? And when I watch them, do I see like bits and pieces of what's worked already? That's the biggest thing with the lower level guys, especially in Delmarva. Like, watching Delmarva is huge, and that you can tell when you watch those games. You can tell who's got it and who doesn't. So I'm pumped to watch Ellis Cuevas and Delmarva. I'm pumped to watch these other guys that just got promoted up there. These college guys, like I think Austin O'Verne is got the bump up to Delmarva. He was part of that group. Like Austin O'Verne. Yeah, Ethan Anderson is just the wild card. That every year there's a wild card, and I don't know how to rank him. I'm pumped to watch him, but like Austin O'Verne, I had him 41 on my list. Where is he on our total list here? 38. So I had him 41. He's 38 overall. Like, for me, like, is he Dante Williams 2.0 who just got released? Or is there going to be more there? And so, like, I'm excited to watch him. And if I see something a little bit different there with the bat, then, like, I'm going to be more aggressive ranking him. It's trusting, like, what we've done. Like, I've said this a couple weeks ago. Like, I don't think we tout ourselves in these rankings and our thoughts on certain guys enough. Because, yeah, we say stupid things sometimes about some guys. I know I have. But at the same time, like, we nail a lot of things because we trust what this organization tells us and what they show us and what they value, and just trusting our eyes and what we watch. We watch a lot of minor league ball, and I think it comes out to make a pretty good list.
I will say, sorry, Zach, and this, I want you, maybe this will play into. We have our honorable mentions on the screen if you're watching on YouTube, which subscribe, like, ring the bell, whatever people say. I noticed no John Rhodes, no Hudson Haskin on any of our lists. I'm not sure that happens a year or two ago. I think we know what we have in them, and they are not considered really, at least for me, much of a prospect anymore. Unfortunately, I think they're organizational filler at this point, which to make it that far in professional ball is a feat in itself, and obviously they're talented players. But yeah, I think that goes a long way.
Get rid of Chance Cisco brain. That's what I'm calling it.
Hey, Long Island Ducks Chance Cisco to you.
Exactly. Like it's okay to, when you see it, like there's only so long like you can keep these guys on this list. Again, just trusting everything.
I think for me, the biggest thing that I question more with this list than I have in any of our past lists is availability. And maybe it's because of the injuries we've seen at the big league level this year. But I think Kiefer Lord and Gene Pinto have higher ceilings than a lot of the pitchers on this list. And if both of them bounce back quickly from their injuries, I'm going to put them firmly inside the top 50, maybe even inside the top 30. But there's just such a risk with guys that are hurt, for any length of time. You don't know how they're going to bounce back. So that was on my mind a lot more this year. And then to Bob's point with Rhodes and Haskin, I think the reason that both of them have held on to our list, I know I've thought about this for a long time with them, is that, well, there's fourth, fifth outfielder potential with those guys, as there was with Dante Williams. But a lot of times it's about trying to find the line between the guy that's going to be a career upper levels minor league player versus the guy that can stick on a major league bench. So if I'm looking at John Rhodes compared to Tavian Josenberger, well, Josenberger plays more positions. He's more athletic. He runs better. He walks a lot more. Rhodes, as I said when he was drafted, has the raw skill set of an everyday right fielder. It's a matter of whether or not he can put it together. And because of injuries and some other things, he just has not been able to put it together. I hope that I still have some hope for him. I still have some hope for Hudson Haskin, but you start to see where, all right, they're clearly below that line of being someone who can contribute in a reserve role at the major league level versus being an upper levels minor league guy who has organizational depth.
And it's also good that we update this every month, like over on Patreon as well. So we're constantly talking about this on a monthly basis, giving our thoughts. And it's a dynamic list, as I think it should. Like I know Baseball America started updating theirs much more frequently, and for good reason. And it's why we do it. Like it's really fun to see these guys as they move up, and some of these guys move down, but they bounce back. But to see the growth year over year with these prospects, it's truly phenomenal to see like Creed Willems firmly inside our top 20 now. Like this is a guy who like we had so many questions about, and now look at what he's doing in high A. And like to follow this growth, it's like we now know like exactly what this organization values in their catchers. And I feel a lot more confident saying Creed Willems is a guy that we should pay attention to. And what he's doing matches up to what this organization wants and down the line. But yeah, I do agree that with the availability stuff, with the injuries, it's why like it's hard for me to keep Carter Baumler on this list because he's pitched 49 innings. He's been a pro for 5 years. He's pitched 49 innings. Like it's hard to keep, maybe he's Hunter Harvey 2.0, but at the same time, it's like it's hard to keep him on this list. So yeah, that's another thing. Maybe I ding guys too much for their injuries, but it's tough.
One last question here before we wrap up, because I think it's basically a looming question on a lot of fans' minds. This is probably the last list that we're going to have that has Jackson Holliday on it. It's very possible it's going to be one of the last lists or one of the last lists that has Kobe Mayo and Cade Povich on it. And the question keeps popping up. Do the Orioles still have even a top 10 to top 15 farm system, let alone an elite farm system, without those guys? So I'll just put it out to you, starting with Bob. What does this farm system look like when those guys have graduated?
I still think even when Mayo, Holiday, Povich, McDermott graduate, I still think we're middle of the pack farm system that is going to have pop-up guys, could be borderline top 10. I don't know if we'll have another Kobe Mayo, Jackson Holiday, Gunnar Henderson type prospect, Samuel Basayo. I think we will. I think from the international pipeline, specifically, I think that's where that would come from. I don't know if it's going to be, I don't know if it's ever been on such a regular basis in baseball history as it has over the past 4 or 5 years. So that's not really saying much, but I could see us more. I'm trying to think of the team to compare to. I want to say Dodgers, where it's like they trade guys every year, but there's always guys that are popping up that it's like, oh, wow, they somehow have a great farm system again, despite yada, yada, yada. Honestly, the Yankees have that kind of thing too, where it's they always have guys that they can trade for value at the deadline when you think, oh, they just got rid of all their good prospects. No, all of a sudden they got some more. So I think the Orioles will be, obviously payroll compared to those teams remains to be seen, but from a development and scouting standpoint, I think we'll constantly be middle of the pack, anywhere from 5 to maybe as low as 18, 20, but somewhere in there throughout the next few years and moving forward. So I don't think there's much to worry about. The most important part is they got them to the major leagues. I listened to the episode last week. This is almost as homegrown of a lineup as you could find, and just super talented guys. And there's more coming. So, you get them to the majors, you have them contributing to your major league team. That's the point of all this anyway. Yeah, I think it's fine if they settle back after this next crop and just be a upper mid to mid level farm system. I think that's kind of the goal, honestly.
Yeah. So you take a year off, guys. It's okay. How many organizations hit as often as the Orioles have? That's not just luck. There's a lot of luck involved, but that is not just luck. That is scouting and player development, blah, blah, blah. We've heard it a million times. I think the Yankees are a good example because I feel like their draft classes are never super sexy, and their domestic prospects, the guys they pick up in the draft, are never okay, yeah, you get a Spencer Jones every now and then. I don't want to start an argument there about Spencer Jones, but I'm not a Spencer Jones guy either. But he is well regarded nationally. You're going to find those guys every couple of years for sure. Even if you're picking the back end of the first round, you're going to have that guy that really breaks through. Especially watch what Enrique Bradfield Jr. does over the next year. Watch what Vance Honeycutt does over the next year. This organization can still find value in the back end of the first round, into the second, even third rounds. But I think kind of what Bob alluded to there, it's now pay attention to the international side of things, because these college guys, they're going to grab a bunch of, look at this most recent draft class. They're going to draft a bunch of Chase Allsups in this organization, right? And it's how many of those Chase Allsups can become, the next Brandon Young. If you get one of those every couple of years, great. But the international side of things, that's where you're going to find your next, top 10, top 15 prospect in baseball. That's where you're going to find your future studs. As we've talked about for years now, the draft, you raise the floor, the international side, you raise the ceiling. And as that department gets ramped up, pay attention to Emilio Sanchez, pay attention to Steven Martinez and Jordan Sanchez, Aaron Estrada. You want to talk about guys who are here now? Pay attention to what Aaron Estrada and Leandro Arias and Thomas Sosa do in Aberdeen. Those international guys, they're still so young and raw, they could spike into some top 100 prospect in a year in no time.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. I think that Orioles fans, frankly, have been a little spoiled in the last couple of years by the way the farm system has just turned out. Not just a lot of elite talent, but frankly, number one overall prospects on top 100 lists. That streak is going to end after this year. It already has ended on some outlets' lists, but Samuel Basallo is going to go into next year as easily a top 15 to top 20 prospect in the game, maybe even top 10. You have a lot of guys that could be risers. Honestly, I still see this as an upper half farm system in this game. So in other words, 15 or above. I still see them in that range. And there's going to be some guys that don't work out. That's just the nature of things. But there's going to be some others that do click. And I think it's going to keep the rankings high for a while. So something to keep an eye on. And with that, that does it for this episode. We will be back next week. We might take a deeper dive into the players that just missed our top 50, depending on how the news cycle goes over the next week or so. Of course, we'll also take a look at what's going on in the major leagues as well. In the meantime, you can follow us on our many social media channels, including Facebook, Instagram, Threads, X, TikTok, and YouTube. We're also over at Substack, OriolesOnTheVerge.substack.com. You can also sign up to become a member of our Patreon community. And at the $3 and $5 level, or at the $5 and $10 levels, have access to bonus daily coverage from Bob, Nick, and myself. What I should mention is that if you are a member of the Patreon community, you will get the monthly updates between now and the end of the regular season, so probably September and October. And then sometime over the winter, we will start our daily countdown of the pre-2025 top 50 list. So if you want that before anybody else, you sign up for our Patreon community and get access to that. For Bob Phil and Nick Stevens, this is Zach Spedden. You've been listening to Orioles on the Verge, presented by Bet Online and part of the Believe Podcast Network.
You know when you're listening to a true crime story that has an unbelievable plot twist that makes you stop in your tracks? That's what our podcast, People Are the Worst, brings you with each episode. I'm Rachel.
And I'm Rebecca. We're identical twins who love true crime cases that make you say, didn't see that coming, and we hate the people responsible for them. Listen to People Are the Worst now on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.